Today, we're going to dig into a profound breakdown in workplace safety and corporate governance. And look, this isn't just a story about individual misconduct. This is an investigative look at how the systems, the very systems designed to protect employees at a major IT firm, failed. Utterly. We'll explore how years of alleged abuse were allowed to fester in the shadows. And we'll start right at the moment it all came crashing down. This right here, this single sentence, gets to the absolute core of the problem. People reached out for help. They used the proper channels, they sent emails, they left a documented trail. And in return, they were met with nothing, just silence. So how does that happen? How does a company's promise of safety just completely fall apart? That's the central question we're going to unpack today. We're going to trace the timeline, look at the evidence, and really try to understand the anatomy of a failure that raises some very serious questions. All right, let's jump right into the moment this whole thing blew up. It's the spring of 2026, and years of suppressed complaints finally erupt into a massive public scandal. A story that had been locked inside the walls of a single office in Nashik was suddenly on the national stage. And we're not talking about one person. We're talking about nine separate official complaints, or FIRs, were filed with the police. And that number, 9, that's a huge red flag. 9 official complaints from one workplace tells you this probably isn't just some isolated incident, right? It points to something much bigger, a potential pattern. And what people were alleging, it's just incredibly serious and deeply disturbing. The picture that's painted is of a predatory, completely hostile work environment. People were allegedly facing everything from sexual exploitation and stalking to being coerced psychologically and even threatened with losing their jobs if they didn't go along with it. So for this to get to a crisis point, it didn't just happen overnight. You have to rewind the clock. Investigators believe this was a slow burn, a gradual collapse of all the safety nets that started way back in 2022. Okay, this timeline, this is so important. Look at this. The first complaints, made internally, were allegedly just dismissed. That was in 2022. Fast forward 4 years, a whole 4 years before any arrests were made. And for all that time in between, as the abuse was reportedly getting worse, the internal systems, they did nothing. And here's the kicker. The thing that finally broke the silence, it wasn't some internal audit. It came from a tip-off from someone on the outside. So, you have to ask, right? Did management even know this was happening? Well, according to the police, a resounding yes. They found 78 emails and chats. 78? All detailing the harassment. And these messages weren't just sent into thin air. They were allegedly sent directly to senior managers, including someone who was, believe it or not, a member of the company's official anti-sexual harassment committee. Investigators have a name for what they think happened here, the oversight vacuum. And it's a really important lesson for any big company that's expanding fast. The idea is, as you open offices in smaller cities, you risk creating these little islands where the main corporate headquarters can't really see what's going on. And in this case, the theory is that the Nashik office became one of those islands, a silo where local management could basically operate without any real checks and balances. So, with the internal system completely broken, something had to give. The change had to come from the outside. And what happened next, well, it was a pretty extraordinary police operation. It all started with a tip. In February of 2026, a local political worker just noticed something was off with a young employee. That person made a call to the police. And that one observation from an outsider, not an employee, not an executive, that's what finally got the wheels turning. And how the police responded, it's really something else. They were up against a brick wall, so they decided to go undercover. They sent 6 female police officers to pose as new hires inside the BPO. For 40 days, they were on the inside, just watching, listening, and gathering the evidence they needed to back up what the victims had been saying for years. The guy in charge of the whole investigation, ACP Sandeep Mahike, said this operation was absolutely essential. And think about that for a second. The police had to literally infiltrate a major multinational company just to verify claims that its own HR department had allegedly been ignoring for 4 years. It's incredible. Okay, so the story breaks, arrests are made, and suddenly all eyes are on the company. But their first reaction? It just poured gasoline on the fire. So the company puts out this official statement, right? Touting its zero-tolerance policy and saying it took swift action. But people looked at that and said, swift action? It's been 4 years. The police had to go undercover. Former MP Priyanka Chaturvedi really captured the public mood, calling the response tone-deaf and casually dismissive. It just showed a massive disconnect. Well, after that backlash, a much more serious message came from the very top. The chairman of the parent company, Tata Sons, called the whole situation gravely concerning and anguishing, and he kicked off a high-level internal investigation. And this whole thing sent shockwaves through the IT industry. An employee rights group called Knights went straight to the government. They demanded a massive nationwide audit of all the company's locations. They basically asked, was this a one-off failure, or is this a symptom of a much deeper systemic problem? And that's pretty much where things stand now. The investigation is still going, arrests have been made, but the search for real, full accountability, that's definitely not over. This table really lays it all out, just how far up the chain this failure went. It wasn't just one bad apple. You have the team leaders, the ones accused of the actual harassment. Then you have the HR manager, who allegedly ignored the complaints. Then an assistant general manager, a posh committee member who saw 78 emails and allegedly did nothing. And maybe the most shocking, the operations head, who was part of the state's official posh committee. The very people whose job it was to stop this kind of thing were the ones allegedly enabling it. And it's not over. The case has gotten so serious that national security agencies, we're talking the NIA and the Anti-Terrorism Squad, are now involved. They're digging through all the digital evidence, looking for any signs of outside funding or links to banned groups. It just adds this whole other layer of gravity to the situation. So all of this leaves us with one really crucial question. A zero-tolerance policy on a piece of paper means nothing if the people in charge don't enforce it. So what happens when those very people become the problem? When the system that's supposed to protect you is actually used to shield the abusers? Who is ultimately responsible for keeping employees safe? That's the question at the core of this whole thing, and it's one that every company, not just this one, needs to answer.